Hi everybody, I'm Jack the Rambling Raconteur. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're having a great weekend. Happy Easter if you're celebrating as we are. And now that it's National Poetry Month here in the US, I've been reading some poetry, specifically the Eclogues of Virgil. And this is an early series of 10 poems he wrote. Sometimes they're known as the Bucolics. I believe in classical times they were known as the Bucolics. And they're an example of pastoral poetry, quite literally pastoral poetry. Many of the poems deal with individuals who are shepherds, and they're just out in the fields with their sheep or their goats, and sometimes they're hanging out with each other, and periodically they take out their pipes, they play a little music, they sing in competition with each other. Others are just sort of set out, in the farms and in the fields. And as with everything Virgil writes, there's sort of the two sides we're getting. On one side is, a fairly formal stylized poetry that can be quite wonderful. And then there's this dark undercurrent, the ironies that exist, realizing that Virgil's always creating these wonderful aspects, showing these wonderful sides of Rome, and then reminding us of the reality that exists for many of the people who live under the Roman Empire, we should say, not really in the Roman Empire, but under it. And the Bucolics are no exception, which makes for a striking side of pastoral poetry. So I want to give a couple of quick examples of his, of sort of more the natural side, the beautiful side, and then start to note a couple of the darker undercurrents that exist within these. And then I want to pay a little bit of special attention to Eclogue IV, because that one is sort of famous, and I think you'll understand why once I read a selection from it. But this is from Eclogue VII, and so two shepherds are kind of in competition. And here's how they describe the land they're around. You mossy springs and meadow grass softer than sleep, and that arbutus green whose rare shade covers you. Fend off the solstice from the flock. Now summer comes, scorching. Now buds are bursting on the tough vine branch. Here's hearth and pitch pine billets. Here's a roaring fire, ever alight, and doorposts black with ingrained soot. We mind the freezing cold of Boreas here no more, than the wolf numbers or torrential streams their banks. Still are the junipers and the prickly Spanish chestnuts. Beneath each tree her fruit is lying strewn around. Now everything is laughing, but if fair Alexis should leave these fields, you'd even see the streams run dry. Parched fields and thirsty grass, dying of tainted air. Liber begrudges tendrilled shapes to these hillsides. But when our Phyllis comes, each coppice will be green, and Jove descend abundantly in merry rain. Dearest the poplar to Alcides, vines to Bacchus, myrtle to lovely Venus, to Phoebus his own bay. Phyllis loves hazels, and while those are Phyllis' love, hazels will never lose to myrtle or Phoebus bay. Fairest the ashen forest, in pleasure gardens pine, poplars by streams and on high mountains silver fir. But visit me more often, lovely Lycidas, and forest ash and garden pine will honor you. Oh, nice for people we love and the different ways we can honor them, and just these wonderful scenes of nature. And in another poem, Eclogue III closes, now close the sluices, lads, the fields have drunk their fill. And so we have this nice sense of, nature in these pastoral poems, but there's a real backdrop, and then there's sort of a philosophical backdrop to all of these poems about just how wonderful the fields are. And, we saw descriptions of trees, and specifically, as Gilbert Hyatt points out in Poets in a Landscape on his section on Virgil, there would be trees where you would then have a vine growing up the tree, and it would be this, almost as if they were married to each other. And Virgil, kind of comments on that sometimes in his poetry, or that line about the chestnuts that have just dropped just so abundantly off of the tree, and just you can't even walk around without the chestnuts just overflowing there. And so it seems like so much is wonderful, but the real backdrop is that these are written in the aftermath of the assassination of Julius Caesar and the victory of Antony and Octavian over the last remnants of the Republican Senate, including Cassius and Brutus, and the murder of Cicero. And so here's Eclogue I and how it ends. Hereafter marvel at my kingdom. A few corn ears, some godless veteran will own this fallow tilth, these cornfields a barbarian. Look where strife has led Rome's wretched citizens. We have sown fields for these? Graft pear trees, Melibus. Now set vines in rows. Go, little she-goats, go, once happy flock of mine. Not I hereafter, stretched full length in some green cave, shall watch you far off, hanging on a thorny crag. I'll sing no songs, not in my keeping, little goats. You'll crop the flowering lucerne and bitter willow. However, for tonight you could rest here with me. Upon green leafage I can offer you ripe fruit and mealy chestnuts and abundance of milk cheese. Far off the rooftops of the farms already smoke, and down from the high mountains taller shadows fall. And the reality is that numerous people have been dispossessed of their farms, they've been thrown off their lands as reward, and those lands have been given over as rewards to those who sided and soldiers who sided and fought under Antony and Octavian. Virgil, in his real life, saw friends and peers in his village lose everything. He was able to keep enough to live off of, and he didn't become a day laborer. But he saw that happen to many people, and that's the reality of these eclogues, and how what a beautiful land. But hey, let's remember who this belongs to now. And so that's sort of the physical reality, the physical dark underside of that Virgil's setting these lovely shepherd poems and songs to. But here's the other side, and it deals with a more philosophical conflict, and that conflict being love. Let's see. The shepherd also came, the heavy swineherds came, Menalcas came, wet through from steaming winter mast. I'll ask him, whence that love of yours? Apollo came. Gallus, you're mad, he cried. Lycurgus, your beloved, pursues another man through snows and horrid camps. Silvanus also came, with rustic honor crowned, tossing tall lilies on his head and fennel flowers. Pan came, Arcadia's god, whom we ourselves have seen, ruddled with elderberry, blood, and cinnabar. When will it end, he said. Love cares not for such things. You'll never glut cruel love with tears, nor grass with streams, nor worker bees with clover, nor she-goats with leaves. But sadly he replied, Arcadians, will you sing, though, of these things to your hills? You are supreme in song, Arcadians. Oh, how softly then my bones would rest, if only your reed pipe hereafter told my love. And how I wish that I'd been one of you, and either guarded your flock or harvested the ripened grapes. For surely were I mad on Phyllis or Amyntas or anyone, what if Amyntas is dark-skinned? Dark too are violets, and bilberries are dark. They'd lie with me among willows, under a limber vine. Phyllis would gather garlands for me, Amyntas sing. Here, Lycurgus, are cool fountains, here soft fields. Here woodland, here with you, I'd be time's casualty. And Virgil shows us a land where in another of the eclogues, they talk about how they almost need to just give some livestock to someone who's mad with love to try and make the person feel better. And here Virgil shows us Pan, who is supposed to be the best, the greatest of the singers, except perhaps Apollo, but the greatest of the singers, and yet realizing that those who are in love and it's unrequited love can feel almost as if they're driven mad, and feel that is truly the worst pain. There are aspects of this that echo Book 4 of The Nature of Things by Lucretius, and Virgil was very much a student of Epicurus, as was Lucretius, and so we see this aspect of love is okay, but unrequited love is destructive and basically the worst possible feeling. Like unrequited love in the eclogues is actually worse than having the farm you and your family have labored for generations on be taken away and just given to somebody else who did nothing for it. And so that's kind of the other dark undercurrent, the dark side to these poems. And perhaps the line of Epicurus that most came to mind as I was reading these and seeing the fragile community that exists between the shepherds as they meet with each other and try to rest in the shade a little bit and drink some cool water and commiserate their unrequited love together and then sing some songs. While there's winners to the competitions, nobody is truly mocked and denigrated. The line that came to mind from Epicurus is the aphorism, "It is not so much our friends' help that helps us as it is the confidence of their help." And this idea that perhaps when everything does seem to be falling apart, it's not that my friend can actually help me and get me my farm back. It's not that my friend can actually, help me feel better, even though I'm lovesick. It's the idea that I have somebody I can go to and share this pain with, that is going to, get me through this day. And so those are many of the 10 eclogues, but Eclogue 4 is really interesting and doesn't seem to quite be as much a pastoral poem. So I want to give a slightly longer reading from that. Sicilian muses, grant me a slightly grander song. Not all delight in trees and lowly tamarisks. Like I said, it's not quite pastoral. Let woods, if woods we sing, be worthy of a consul. Now the last age of Cumae's prophecy has come. The great succession of centuries is born afresh. Now too returns the Virgin. Saturn's rule returns. A new begetting now descends from heaven's height. O chaste Lucina, look with blessing on the boy, whose birth will end the iron race at last and raise a golden through the world. Now your Apollo rules. And Polio, this glory enters time with you. Your consulship begins the march of the great months. With you to guide, if traces of our sin remain, they, nullified, will free the lands from lasting fear. He will receive the life divine and see the gods, mingling with heroes, and himself be seen of them, and rule a world made peaceful by his father's virtues. So that's the opening of the fourth eclogue, which is sometimes called the Messianic eclogue. And I think that was a sort of medieval interpretation of the fourth eclogue. These were written not only before the birth of Christ, of Jesus, but also before a formation of a Christian church that could turn and be aware of Virgil's fourth eclogue, and generations before those occurrences. But there is a sense of destiny in that poem as it starts out, and he goes on to talk about the amazing things that are going to happen on Earth, and that Earth is just going into this like amazing just time of promise and a time of fulfillment. And then there's going to be a bunch of like battles and a second Trojan War and a second Achilles and a bunch of terrible things. But it seems that historically what Virgil was talking about was that this specific poem was written in the aftermath of the marriage between Mark Antony and Octavian's sister. And the idea that through their marriage there would be peace and no more of these, this was another civil war in what had been about 3 generations of civil wars at this point that had racked Rome. And so Virgil is sort of praising this idea that now there can be a lasting peace, and from Antony and Octavia will come this child who will sort of, bring a gentle time and a sense of hope to Rome and to the people of Rome specifically. As I said, the people under the Roman Empire, not just in it. So that's the fourth eclogue, which is I think probably the one that is most frequently read. I really enjoyed reading these. The translation by Guy Lee in here was quite good. The notes have a tendency to focus on Latin poetic techniques that Virgil's employing. The facing pages have Latin and English translation. So that's what a lot of the notes are, if you're really interested in that. In terms of some background reading, I had reread sections of Book 4 from Lucretius on the nature of things, which, as I said, kind of describe the Epicurean philosophy of love. I reread Poets in the Landscape, the chapter on Virgil by Gilbert Hyatt, this is just an amazing book and a great resource for anybody who's interested in Roman poetry. I haven't read this, but sometime in the future I'll read the Georgics, which is sort of the next set of poems Virgil does before the Aeneid. And then in terms of what I was reminded of, well, with pastoral poetry, my favorite English pastoral poet would be Andrew Marvell and the Mower poems. But, there was an interesting technique in the eclogues, which is that Virgil periodically gives himself an assumed name as a character within the poems, and it's not the same assumed name. Kind of in a way where Dante puts himself as a character in the Divine Comedy, and very distinct from the way that Elizabethan poets and Jacobean poets would posit themselves at the center of a sonnet talking about love, or that we see later on in the Romantic tradition, or sort of the confessional tradition in the middle of the 20th century, where poets are writing as an I, and it truly is I, the poet. Virgil is perhaps giving his opinion or his real feelings, but he's doing it at a remove and at a distance behind the mask of some other character who exists within the poem. And perhaps that's necessary. I mean, these poems were written shortly after Cicero had been not only killed, but had his hands cut off for, you know, the Philippics he had written against Mark Antony. So there's a sense of maybe it's intelligent to put your opinions behind a mask. But that distance always exists within Virgil, and it's what, you know, makes a reader question, you know, is he siding with this glorious ideal he's creating, whether it's Arcadia or whether it's, you know, the birth of Rome under Aeneas in the Aeneid, or is he siding with Aeneas as a bad dude who murders Turnus and is terrible to Dido? And, you know, it's pretty awful that all these people have lost their farms. Like, which side is Virgil on? We don't know, because he's always behind this other mask as a character. He doesn't write in an I form. But two others that jumped out. One was John Milton's Lycidas. I don't generally regard Milton as a pastoral poet, and Lycidas is really more of an elegy. But there seems to be, it seems that Milton kind of chose that intentionally with a call to Virgil. And then Dante, Gabriel, Rossetti has a poem called, where's it at? It's, there you go, For a Venetian Pastoral by Giorgione. And that seems not only to be a, you know, a pastoral poem, but specifically to have some intertextuality with the 10th of the Eclogues. Two other quick mentions. One would be The Death of Virgil by Hermann Broch, with this enormous and very dense book that I have yet to read. I've been working on Broch's Sleepwalkers, but I'm looking forward to reading this as I've been rediscovering what I enjoy about Virgil over the past couple of years. And then Virgil's writing these, of course, in the lifetime of Augustus, Caesar, and Suetonius. Certainly gives us a lively view of who that individual was. So these were the Eclogues of Virgil. Let me know if you've read them. Let me know if there's a specific work by Virgil you really enjoy, or other pastoral poets you really enjoy. And again, I hope everybody's having a great weekend. Thanks.